Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, unfiltered look at something probably sitting in your fridge right now, dairy milk. We're going to break down a whole range of sources to get to the real story.
I mean, think about it. Milk. For so many of us, it's been a staple our entire lives. We're told it's nature's perfect food, right? You need it for strong bones, for healthy growth. It's an image we all know so well.
So what's the real story behind that simple glass of milk? Well, today we're diving right in. We're going to explore its biological purpose, what it actually means for our health, and, the industrial process that gets it from the cow to your kitchen.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. A really fundamental point that comes up in the sources is why does milk even exist in the first place, biologically speaking?
And the sources are super clear about this. Milk is made by mammals for one reason and one reason only, to feed their babies. It's nature's perfect formula, but it's species-specific. It's designed to give a newborn exactly what it needs for its own unique development. Whether that's a kitten, a puppy, a human baby, or a calf.
And this is where it gets really interesting. When you actually put human milk and cow's milk side by side, the differences are, well, they're huge. Cow's milk has more than double the protein. Plus, the type of protein is totally different. It's mostly casein, which, for a human stomach, is way harder to digest.
So why all that protein? Well, it's basically rocket fuel for explosive growth. This stuff is literally designed to help a baby calf gain 40 times more weight in its first year than a human baby does. It's growth fuel for an animal that's going to weigh over 1,000 pounds. That's its purpose.
And here's another thing. As we grow up, our bodies just naturally change. And for most people, that means we stop producing the enzyme we need to digest the sugar in milk, which is called lactose. And this isn't some rare thing. The sources say that a staggering 75% of the entire world's population is lactose intolerant. I mean, think about that. It really suggests that for the vast majority of us, our bodies just aren't built to keep drinking milk after we're babies.
Okay, so that's the biology. Now let's get into the second major point from the source material, the health controversy. And this is where we start to see some really serious concerns pop up in the research.
At the heart of this whole discussion is this powerful hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1 for short. Now, it's a huge promoter of cell growth. That's fantastic if you're a developing infant, but in an adult, when that growth isn't properly regulated, that can be dangerous.
The sources basically lay out a straight line here. Step 1, you drink dairy and your IGF-1 levels go up. Step 2, having high IGF-1 levels over time is a major risk factor for the kind of out-of-control cell growth that we call cancer.
And it's not just some vague risk. The research actually connects this process to several very specific hormone-sensitive cancers. The sources we looked at point to studies that link these higher IGF-1 levels from dairy directly to an increased risk of prostate, breast, colorectal, and even thyroid cancer.
And if you want a hard number, here's one. One big study mentioned in the material found that men who ate the most dairy had a 30% higher risk of developing prostate cancer compared to guys who had little to none. 30%. That's a huge number.
But, of course, this is where things get complicated. Because the sources also point to statements from industry groups, right? Like the National Dairy Council. And they insist that, hey, the hormones in milk are natural and there's no health risk.
But then you have the science, and this stands in direct opposition to what multiple studies in the material are saying. They identify these exact same hormones as a major risk factor for human cancers. So, you've got a pretty clear contradiction here.
So that raises a big question, right? If a cow has to be pregnant to produce milk, how does the industry keep it flowing all year round, nonstop? Well, the sources we looked at really pull back the curtain on the whole industrial process that gets milk from the farm into your grocery cart.
Let's be clear about the biology here. It's the fundamental starting point. Just like any other mammal, a cow only produces milk for one reason: to feed her newborn calf. Period. No baby, no milk.
So to turn this natural process into a commercial one, the industry has to rely on this relentless cycle. Cows are artificially inseminated, they give birth, their calves are taken away from them almost immediately, then they're milked for about 10 months, and then the whole cycle starts right back up again.
And the sources get pretty graphic about how this cycle often begins. The semen used for artificial insemination is often collected through a procedure called electroejaculation. The material describes it as incredibly invasive, painful, and it's often done without any anesthetic at all.
So what about all those calves being born? Well, if it's a female, she'll probably just replace her own mother in the dairy line. But the sources are clear that the male calves, they're seen as a byproduct, and they often meet pretty grim fates. They're sold off for veal or beef, and in some cases, they're just euthanized right at birth.
Okay, so after looking at the biology, the health claims, and the reality of the production methods from all these sources, what's the big picture here? Where does this leave us?
Let's just quickly recap the main takeaways from the source material. First, cow's milk is biologically designed for one thing: the rapid growth of calves, not humans. Second, drinking it raises our levels of a hormone, IGF-1, that's been linked to an increased risk of cancer. And third, the industry itself depends on a continuous, and the sources would say brutal, cycle of forced impregnation and taking babies from their mothers.
And all of this really brings us to one final, pretty provocative question that the sources force you to ask. When you look at all the evidence they present, is dairy really this wholesome food we've all been told it is? Or is it a complex biological fluid perfectly designed for a completely different species, with some serious unintended consequences for the one that was never supposed to be drinking it in the first place?